I've been reading.
All right. Welcome to Architects Reviews, Proper Planning to Avoid Spaghetti. My name is Michael Smith. I am a Group Director of Technology or a Solutions Architect at VML Y&R, which means I do a lot of architecture reviews. So when I made the title for this, I was going to put Proper Planning to Avoid Spaghetti Code, because we all know what spaghetti code is, right? It's, no, we don't know what spaghetti code is. That's whenever you write code that is all over the place. You have no idea what it's doing. It can go in 1,000 different directions, probably because you didn't do very good planning to figure out how it's supposed to work. But I didn't put code on here because a lot of what we do to plan beforehand has absolutely nothing to do with code, and it's making sure that all of our systems are in line and that we have a good idea of how a website or a technology project is supposed to function overall. If we don't plan correctly, then we're probably going to end up with some spaghetti. If you came to my talk yesterday about building Drupal practice, you know that I like documentation a lot, and that we should always plan and document everything that we do. So at VML, we do architecture reviews for every single project. Everybody's looking outside. Yuck. Okay. And then my presentation actually is only 2 slides. It's the one before that, and then it's this one. And the only reason that there's this one is because somebody told me that they wanted to see a plate of spaghetti on my slide. So there it is. What we're actually going to do is walk through an architecture review that is a fake architecture review that I kind of wrote yesterday and last night about the Drupal Pet Store, which is a website that we're building someday, today. So for every single project that we do at VML Y&R, we do one of these architecture reviews. And we'll do these architecture reviews in 2 different ways. We'll do a large one and we'll do a mini one. The large one is really the normal one that we'll do with any new project, any new technology that we've never used at VML Y&R, or a new client, or if it's just significantly big enough. So it's really the default. The second one is the small one, which we'll do, which is really just constraining it to a smaller group of people who are subject matter experts. And we'll do that for things like theme refactors, like a 4-sprint project that really doesn't have a lot of technology stuff, and it's something that we do every day. So when we do the normal one, the regular one, what we do is we grab other solutions architects, so other people in the software engineering technology world at VML Y&R, and quality assurance, tech ops, security, and other people who are experts in whatever we're working with. And we all get in a room and we read over this big long form that somebody filled out, and we say, did you remember to do that? Did you remember to do that? What did you ever think about this? Just really to pick everyone's brains and say, did you cross all your T's, dot all of your I's, and think about all the little things that can go wrong or that maybe just weren't thought of. When we do this, it allows us to build really stable things that don't have a lot of holes in them. The smaller one, much the same thing, except generally if it's a Drupal project, we'll constrain it to really just Drupal people, and we'll bring more leads and those type of people in instead of introducing the AEM guys. That's important, by the way. With the big ones, when we're talking about Drupal projects, we're not just bringing in Drupal guys. We're bringing in all of the technology guys. Bill Dinger here sitting in the center, he is another solutions architect at VML, and he is primarily an AEM guy. So he'll come to our Drupal ones and actually ask us questions and say, look, I'm looking at this from my standpoint, not doing Drupal projects every day. I might have a different perspective on things. So it's really, really useful. And I recommend that everybody have some sort of architecture review like this for every one of your projects. So what we're going to do is just kind of walk through this, kind of like we're doing an architecture review. A lot of this stuff that I have in here is not at all real, so you'll see things in the description that doesn't match things later on. You can call me out on it if you want. I know it. It's fine. But we're just going to talk about a little bit what we put in there. So the first thing that's on here is our review criteria. This is really just boilerplate stuff. A lot of this stuff is probably really specific just for us as an agency, but it helps us decide what things we need to start looking at. Obviously, if we see there's a potential for PII, everybody know what PII is, personally identifiable information. If we know that there's a potential for that, then we need to look more heavily at security. Market-driven launch date, we know that we need to make sure that we have this buttoned up and we're not trying to do too much that we're going to blow the scope, not get this project out on time, things like that. So then the first thing we have here is our project overview. This is really just like your 30-second elevator pitch. If your boss comes up to you and say, hey, what are you working on? This is what you need to tell them. And you got to give them the specifics. I am working on a site in Drupal. It is Drupal 8, hosted at Aquia for this client. And it's mostly unauthenticated users that are going to be doing this, that, and the other. So what we have here is the Drupal Pet Store is a basic marketing and brochure site for the Drupal Pet Store. Wow, that's redundant. The site will be mostly anonymous users looking to find a new pet that perfectly fits their needs. Pets will need to be updated by the employees of the Drupal Pet Store fairly regularly. This site is built on Drupal, hosted on Aquia, and will include a service layer that exposes the pets available for adoption to other devices' services using a REST API. Then we get down to some more project details here where we actually list out everybody that's working on the project. This is really important because we could say, wait a minute, do you have a solutions delivery person, which is our analyst? Do you have a business analyst making requirements for you? Or do you have UX, things like that? So important just to make sure that we have people, our list of key dates so that we could say, hey, that key date doesn't make sense. You realize we're closed that entire week. Okay, that's a good thing to catch, right? So we're really looking for all the things, not just technology. And then a list of links to Jira, Bitbucket, Envision, UX, wireframes, anything we can think of, all in one place. Stop me if you have any questions, by the way. This can be very collaborative. And if you see something. How do I do that?
There you go. I'd also point out, most of the reason, like almost all the stuff on this is because at one point or another, some project has blown up because domain accounted for it.
Yeah.
Like literally everything on this is because somebody missed something and there was either a huge amount of money lost or a project deadline missed or a client got mad.
Yep. We also put a lot of detail in here for a reason because I should be able to look at this and find out everything about that project by just looking here. I probably over-plan some of these and write a lot more paragraphs than need to be, but that's just because I don't like to be asked questions. I put a lot of stuff in there.
So you guys use this as like a living document to update for changes?
We do it one time at the beginning of the project generally. We will go back and update it as we get feedback from that project, so we'll get a lot of notes from that. We'll go back and fix everything or make sure we get everything done. And then we'll generally let that go for the project, and then if there's a new scope or something, then we'll generate a new one. So yeah, it's really at the beginning. We do have build documents that we keep in our code repositories, which is a more living document that developers can use. Every project also has a space on Confluence where we keep everything. We're big fans of Confluence. We try to document a lot of stuff.
Is this where you keep Confluence? Do you keep this in Confluence?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Confluence. This is actually our Confluence. You can use any wiki type thing you like. This is actually a document on our Confluence right now.
So on another client, they actually requested that we do it in Markdown inside the repo so keep track of the code.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
And we do
that, and you can't do all the nice architecture diagrams. It's going to show you.
We do our build docs actually in Markdown inside the code repos. The other thing here is that after we get past this overview, what we're looking for is the exception to the default. So we want everything to be the exact same product. Again, if you saw my thing yesterday, you know that I like things to be commoditized, which means it's absolutely repeatable every single time. So we're looking for all the things that aren't repeatable, because repeatable stuff, we know it's going to work. We've done it 100 times. So I'm going to kind of skim through this overview just to give you an idea of what we put in here. I may skip some sentences. So this is a Drupal 8 site. We're hosting at Aquia, primarily unauthenticated. It's important to say that authenticated versus unauthenticated. Sun's out. Important to make that distinction between authenticated and unauthenticated sites for performance reasons. We have to make sure that we figure that out early on. All of you guys that work in Drupal, you definitely know that Drupal is slow. Every CMS is slow. So we need to figure that out. The site functions as a mix of marketing information and a listing of pets available. The marketing information sections will be largely static. The pets need to be updated regularly by employees at the Drupal Pet Store. That's an important phrase right there. The site needs to be built so that other people outside of technology can update it. So really important to keep that in mind when we're doing the site. The pets available for adoption will be updated by employees. I just said that. Most of the site will be accessible and used unauthenticated. We will support an authenticated section for users to manage their adoption process. Okay, so we keep that in mind. We we do have a part that's going to be slow, or that we need to figure out how to make faster. The site will display a lot of images in order to help potential adopters find their new pets, so we're going to look at ways to speed it up. We'll use server-side image cropping, resizing, file reduction. We'll make sure we use a CDN, Be Lazy, or Blazy, Varnish for static proxy to help keep page load times. I've always called it Blazy, but yesterday you called it Be Lazy, so I'm going to call it Be Lazy now. That's true. The marketing section of the site will be created using a series of custom components. These things will all be figured out and documented in JIRA tickets. The pet listing will be made up of content that is tagged by a series of custom taxonomy vocabulary. Ordering, filtering, and searching is done via Apache Solr provided by Aquia, the Drupal Search API module. User administration is all done by Drupal Pet Stores AD, because they're a really advanced pet store that has Active Directory, and they have single sign-on. I'm just putting random stuff in here. Developers will use the Drupal kit installation of Drupal and Doxel to set and manage dependencies, decencies, dependencies, and builds. This allows each developer to have their own environment that mimics production. 301 redirects supplied by SEO, GTM supplied by GTM, and there will be a GTM data layer. And no content entry or automated migration will be done by us. It'll all be done by the client. So all those things are really important stuff that we actually have to think about. Things like GTM. Analytics. That gets pushed off to the very end of so many projects. If you don't think about it now, you're not going to do it, or you're not going to plan for it.
If I see some of these, another thing is like how we're doing content searches by querying the CMS. It doesn't really matter what CMS you use; they all suck unless you use something like Apache Solr, right? So always something to call out and look for. So somebody has to do a bunch of CMS queries.
So just a basic rundown of what the site's going to do, what different services it's going to actually be calling, and then what systems you're going to be integrating with. The rest of the document supports this. So the rest of the document's a lot of questions like, did you think about this, did you think about that? It all supports stuff that's up here. So everything else later on is already here in narrative format. Then we get down into key assumptions and known risks. Key assumptions are important because we're saying that whenever we're building this, we've estimated it's going to take this long. It's based off of these assumptions. So these are the things that we really need to make sure we nail down. And then known risk. These are things that we're going to start asking in the architect's review, how are you going to mitigate that? Because we don't want any of our projects to go south. So assumptions will be things like content entries done by the client. We're not doing it. That's always a great assumption, unless, of course, you have a scope that says otherwise, because that'll tack on a lot of extra time at the end of a project. The majority of the site will be served unauthenticated, allows us to rely heavily on caching for site performance. The site will be hosted on Aquia, allows us to use our standard build process. That's a good key assumption generally for us. We have a process that works really well with Pantheon and Aquia. If somebody says for some reason, well, we need to do that in AWS, that's going to make me think, did you account for that in your timeline? Because that's going to take another 2 or 3 weeks for somebody to figure out how to do. You need hours from tech ops, etc. Known risks. So we've been waiting on third-party APIs that aren't yet finished. Hopefully they're finished by 6.17. I don't really have a mitigation for that yet. We'll review on 6.17. The business owner decided to go on vacation at the time that we're going to launch. That's a really big risk. So we just want to call that out early on and say that's going to happen. That actually happened last year. Business owner got married, went on his honeymoon like the week of our launch. And he's like, I trust you guys. It's great. It went beautiful. Seriously. But he did that. It's a risk. Creator reviews have already gone over schedule. We're working to mitigate this by assigning an extra project manager to make sure that we're doing that we're actually getting the reviews back from the client in time. That I don't know for everyone, but that's a big thing that we always have to watch out for, so it's a big risk. And the client has access to the GTM data layer, has a history of putting untested JavaScript on their site. This happened to Bill yesterday. It wasn't actually GTM, but so I thought I'd throw that in there because he told me about it.
I do appreciate that. I do ruin my Friday night. So.
Best practice in reuse is a good place to capture anything that we're doing that's really useful that we could, push off to other projects or other technologies, things like that. I really couldn't think of much to say, so I said that we're using our automated deployment. It's a best practice, but we always do it, so it's not that big of a deal.
This is that part is really cool for people like me when I hop over to a Drupal project and I so how I got the idea for using a lot of the Docker stuff we use for was seeing stuff like this in ARC reviews because they use Doxel for everything. So it's a good way of sharing information between teams. But hey, this is something really cool we're doing.
The other thing that you'll see here, and you'll see it more as I go further down, is that we do a lot of linking inside of it to other things that have already been written. So again, because we're trying to write the exceptions in this thing, I don't need to repeat how we do our automated code building every time. We write it once in Confluence and link to it every time. So ideally, like most of this architecture review can just be a bunch of blue links to everything, right? That's ideally what it should be. Opportunities and growth, these are just things to say, like, is this a good fit for us? Like, is there something we should learn out of this and maybe write a POV on, things like that. So this has given us an opportunity to work with the Salsify PEM. I know I didn't say anything about a Salsify PEM earlier, so it didn't match quite up. Kind of helps build our expertise, and we have a ready-made reference architecture for future projects. So then after that, we get down to the architecture diagram. So it's a good place to put all your architecture diagrams that you've thought up so far. So if you're using AWS services or microservices, you use any type of queue workers, things like that, it's always fun to throw diagrams on there. These aren't for the Drupal pet store. These are for United Rentals, I think. But good place to throw a lot of diagrams. And then really start having a conversation about those. Make sure that we've thought through everything on these diagrams. Hey, what is this diagram? Did you actually take into account that we need a CDN in here? Because I'm not seeing a CDN in here. You know, things like that. Good place to review that. So as we scroll down here, this is where we just start answering questions, literally that are on the form. So no more narratives, just answering questions now. What technology stack is primarily being used, including the client side and the server side? So on this one, we actually want to know versions of all the different stuff that's being used. With Drupal, we use the same frickin' thing every time, so cool. Page not found. Oops. Live demos. Live demos. So again, we just link out to the same stack, right? But if we're doing something different, for instance, we're using Pantheon for the first time instead of using Aquia. Then, you know, Pantheon maybe uses MySQL, whereas Aquia uses Percona. I actually don't know. But I would have to create a different architecture or a different stack for that. Things like that, not super relevant for the Drupal folks. We've never really done too much there. It's always standard, but I'm sure something might come up someday where it will be useful to us. Does this project utilize a CMS? Which one? Drupal 8, we're at the Drupal conference, what we're talking about. For us, that's really easy, but lots of times we do technology projects that aren't necessarily CMS, so it's good to know that. Bless you. Does this project include a mobile application or a spa? No, it doesn't. Again, good to know. If we do have a mobile application, what are we doing to work on that? Is that an iOS application, Android application? Is it a web app that we're just serving inside a browser? Is it an actual native application? How's authentication handled for this project? Custom built. Did we follow our security guidelines? We say, yep, we got Drupal 8 auth handling. There's no deviation. It's the standard. Link off, just like you saw the other one.
Exactly like the other one.
Down at the bottom there.
Did I must have broke something. I think they moved.
They renamed the space.
Yeah, I think I copied it from an old one. I just copied an old architecture review, and it's down there somewhere. Is session management being handled by a well-known implementation, or is it custom built? Follow security guidelines? Yep, we're using Drupal 8s. No problem there. Is there any type of personalization being utilized? Is it custom built, provided by a third party out of box? We'll be using Aqualift for this personalization. So when we start talking about personalization, a big thing that we're looking for is who's actually doing this segmentation. Has anybody here done personalization? Okay, so you probably know it's like technology part is easy. Like it's if-else statements. There's nothing else to it. There's a little bit more to it, but that's basically it. The hard part comes in somebody actually going through the analytics layers, finding these segmentations, tagging the content, telling us what the content needs to be tagged as, things like that. So it's a good thing to call that out to make sure up front that somebody's thought about that. Because every client I've ever talked to thinks it's a magic black box that we push a button and it's personalized content. It's not how it works for us. So we just want to call out all the things that we're doing there. List any third-party web services, so it's using Google Maps API, utilize the location where pets are currently being fostered. So if I saw this in an architecture review, I would ask, who's paying that license? Because you get like, what, 1,000 or something for free a day? What if I get more users? If you didn't think about that, then you're going to have a site that went down or your location services aren't going to work. So that's what I'm going to ask on this one. Has anybody thought about licensing cost? If you see some more custom things, you'll start asking, why are you using that? Have you thought about using this review application that we use all the time as opposed to that one. Really looking for red flags on why you're using a specific API over another one. Custom-built web services, publicly exposed, utilize external processes. Say, yeah, we're exposing the pets available via Drupal views. We all know we can do that. And then somebody says, can Drupal do that? And we say, there's a module for that. Because there's a module for everything, right? Is A/B testing currently being used? How's it tracked and being reported on? Yes, we're doing A/B testing using Visual Website Optimizer. The client provisions the VWO license. Nothing special there. List any systems they're being integrated with. The contact form will post contact data into Salesforce, and I can't type, should have an S on there. Utilize the web form Salesforce integration module from the Drupal community. I don't actually know if that's the name of the module, and I would normally link to it. I did not because I typed this up and didn't actually look to see if there's a module. I'm sure there is. But I'm calling out the fact that we are actually using Salesforce and that we don't have to do the custom implementation ourselves. Somebody's already done it. We just have to write some glue code to it. How is search being handled? Aqua Solar, standard Aqua implementation. Again, I'm going to link out to that so someone can go read about it. I don't have to type it again. Are there any plans to use a CDN or other caching technologies? The big thing you want to ask here is if they say no, you say why not? Caching or CDNs are relatively cheap, and everything should be using a cache unless there's a really good reason not to, the CDN cache. The other thing that we always want to ask about is purging CDNs. So, okay, great, you're using a CDN. What is your strategy to actually make sure that you're invalidating it whenever things change? We have the purge module. It works pretty well for us. Do you have something you should?
My favorite story is why that question is on there.
Go for it.
Is because we had an offshore office with no one name building a site for a major sports league in Europe, and they literally didn't have a CDN. So the first time a football match happened, soccer match, like all of a sudden the site dropped completely because you got 45 million people hitting it, trying to get sports scores. Anyway, I love our stories, why some of the stuff is on here.
So the other thing is this thing is a living outline too. It gets updated after every one of our architecture reviews. We say, we didn't ask that question. Why is that question on the form? And we will go update the form so that next time that question is there. So we update this thing, and it changes all the time. This is not the latest version. I think the newest version actually asks about percentages of people that are on a project, so we don't end up with projects with like 10% of an analyst, because that happened recently. And guess what? The lead did all the analyst work.
And that security section has blown a lot in the last couple of years too.
This one I think is actually fairly up to date.
No, I just mean we did ARC reviews from 3 years ago and had 2 security questions on it.
Yeah. This one doesn't have GDPR on it, so that means we've added GDPR since then. Our VML internal password, see it even says the wrong name. Internal password secrets, admin account stored, and Password Manager Pro. So this is an important thing. We use Password Manager Pro for all of our passwords, and we just want to make sure that that is our standard and we're using it everywhere as opposed to a spreadsheet, or we're using this Vault software over here and we're just changing the password over there. For our Drupal projects, we actually don't store passwords, but it's a good thing to ask to make sure that all of our projects across the organization are all using the same password system. And again, I'm going to link out to things. Have you scheduled or already executed a security scan? I love putting JIRA tickets in ARC reviews. A lot of these questions we're going to ask, it's like, well, we're going to do that in the future. Like, have you validated this against the pre-launch checklist? Yeah, I will in 8 weeks when we're done with it or whenever, right? But if I put the JIRA ticket in there, then I know I've made that ticket. It's going to come up. I'm going to see it. It's going to happen. So, and you can use whatever your ticket software is, but I like putting the actual ticket link in there so I know it's been done. Somebody has assigned it right now at the beginning of a project. I'm not going to forget it later on. What PII or PCI information is actually being captured? This one sparks a lot of debate every time we talk about it, unless we say things like we're just going to pass it through to Salesforce. So websites should not, in my opinion, ever store data that isn't going to be displayed back to users. The point of a website, the point of a marketing website is to display data. It is not to just house data. So get that PCI, PI information out, and if you say that you're storing it, I'm going to start asking why. If you are storing it, I'm going to say, is it encrypted? Is it encrypted at rest or just in transit? When it's encrypted at rest, are you having to decrypt it every time you show it? Why are you showing it? You know, we're going to start asking a lot of questions like that. Who has access to that, right? Even our developers shouldn't have access to somebody's PII information. So this is a really big one that's going to, or for us anyway, it always sparks a lot of debates on where is that stored? Is there a better way we can do it? And a lot of times they'll come out and say, well, that's what the client wants to do. We'll say, well, can we talk to the client and get them to change their minds and find a different way to do it? Best way, I think, is always pass that through to another thing like a CRM to where it belongs. Does anybody disagree with passing it on to a CRM passionately? Do it?
That's the bug.
Yeah. Get it off of us, right?
What's the alternative to that?
To what?
What's the alternative to passing it on to a CRM? Is there another good alternative?
You could, yeah, it doesn't have to be a CRM. It's just passing it off to not a web server that is publicly accessible. You can store it on the web server, but you need to encrypt it at rest and make sure that there's no way anybody can get any information out of it. Even when it's encrypted at rest, if it's on a database that's still exposed to the world, it's still not great. There are systems that are written specifically for that, and those are the systems that should be used, like a CRM. I'm sure there's other things that you can do that aren't necessarily a CRM that work fine. Yeah.
So what about like the adoption process thing that you talked about earlier? Like how would you do that? You have PII that needs to be
sent to a CRM, Salesforce.
But then you have to query that when you have the adoption process. Like, you know, Joe Bob wants to adopt or is adopted.
Yeah, somebody needs to query, you mean? Somebody needs to get that information?
Yeah.
Yeah, but not a web developer? Somebody that works at the Drupal Pet Store has access to the CRM, not me. Is that what you're asking?
Oh, I thought there was a customer-facing adoption process.
Oh, I probably put that up there. Okay. I'd probably put it up there, you're right. I would still probably put it in Salesforce and call it with an API when I needed it.
Okay.
Yeah, just from the browser side, right? Like you wouldn't ever, the CRM would never talk, or the CMS would never talk to it. The browser would only talk to it. If you do stuff like that, then you usually fall under like a lesser scope.
I'm sorry, I forgot I put that up there.
Yeah.
Good call. Yeah. I still would try not to store it on our side. I still might have the server call it and then just display it, but never actually store it anywhere, like in a database, because we don't want it on ours. But yeah, and we would never actually display like credit card information back to them or anything, right? So it would just be phone numbers, emails, things like that. So that's the other thing is, even if you pass off things like to Salesforce using Drupal Web Forms, generally Drupal Web Forms is still going to create a submission on the Drupal side, make sure that it doesn't, or it gets deleted right away. I've had that happen before where I'm like, yeah, we passed that off, and then like a month later I'm like,
We copy that off.
actually I have a ton of submissions, I should fix this. Just a little thing that happens to me occasionally. Any other questions on that? Okay. What data encryption techniques are being used? TLS and transit, always enforce. That should be an all-the-time thing. If somebody doesn't have an SSL cert and they're using a CMS, they should really figure out why. You used to not want to use it all the time because it was slow, right, the overhead, but we all live on broadband now, and there's really no point in not using a TLS certificate. The cost is minimal. I think there's a free service now.
Let's encrypt.
That's encrypt, yeah, and there's no reason not to, so encrypt everything.
Drupal modules for Let's Encrypt, right? It's really easy.
Probably. There's some module for that. I used to put SSL here, and then the tech op guys started yelling at me and said it's not SSL, it's TLS. So I don't know if that matters to anybody else, but there it is. And then I always call out that we have nothing actually is encrypted at rest. If you do need to encrypt at rest, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can encrypt as you go in and out of the database by just like an entity field wrapper or something. Or if you want to do something like AWS, it actually has native encryption on the database side. I'm not exactly sure how it works, as I've never done it, but it looks pretty cool. Authentication authorization accomplished. Again, this is boilerplate stuff, so it really doesn't have too much to do with Drupal because we all know Drupal does most of that for us. What's the plan for incident report and response? This might be specific to us, but we always like to have a plan for what happens whenever we wake up in the morning and we see on the U.S. news website or something that one of our big clients had something get hacked. What are we going to do? So we have a checklist, and we make sure we review it, and we talk about it with the client. What's the plan for proactive patching of servers, platforms, and libraries? Aquia provides a server patching automatically for server software. And then we call out that during development, we'll actually do the patching and make sure Drupal core is up to date and everything. But after that, unless we have a maintenance agreement, we hand it off to the client and we have reviewed it with them. Sometimes, we don't. Sometimes we continue to work on that all the time, and so we'll keep it up to date. We'll change that. If there's a security breach, what liability? This is just fun stuff that we need to ask. Everybody should ask the questions to. What's going to happen? Because you always want to play the everything's going to go wrong at some point card. What are we going to do to fix it when it goes wrong? Has anybody heard of a Premortem, by the way?
Are you talking about like the threat assessment ones that they do? Like the pre
It's a post.
red threat assessments?
Not necessarily a threat assessment. It's a post-mortem, except you do it before the project even starts. So everybody gets has everybody done a post-mortem or a retrospective? You say, oh my God, the project went south. It was bad. What did we do wrong? Oh, we need to fix this in the future. So a pre-mortem, I heard about this on a podcast. It had absolutely nothing to do with software development. I don't even remember what it was. I think it was talking about law. They talk about doing post or pre-mortems, where you sit down in a room and you say, imagine it's 6 months from now, the project failed. What happened? So then we preemptively get ahead of things and say, I'll bet you that's why it failed. And then we can harden that now so it doesn't fail in the future. I haven't done one of those, but I really want to. I think it sounds like a really cool idea.
Works best when you can time travel.
Do what?
Works best when you can time travel.
Yeah, well, you got to use your imagination, but yeah, I think it'd be a fun way to do it. To think, hey, what is going to go wrong, and fix them early.
Isn't it just a fun way to say risk assessment? I mean,
Yeah, sort of. Except it's not necessarily risk. I mean, I think when you talk about a risk assessment, you're thinking about like all the things that technically went wrong. Whereas we could talk about what went wrong with the project and everything, which is what a lot of our pre or post-mortems are, is what went wrong with the project, not necessarily technology.
From a technical perspective, from a non-technical perspective, there's a lot of non-technical risks that you might identify. But
So maybe it is the same thing. Then I don't know.
I mean, similar. I
Do
would say.
you include the entire team on a risk assessment, like you do on a post-mortem?
I think it would be best practice to do such a thing.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, on the pre-mortem, that's what I would do. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll have to look into that then. What's the date for the initial security threat assessment? Again, this is just like the security scan. Create yourself a JIRA ticket and say it's going to be done. So that you can see I actually copied this from another project. Get down to some developments things. How are code reviews being handled and how often are they being scheduled? This is really just to make sure you're doing them. If we get to this question and it says we're not doing code reviews, again, red flag, say why? Why are you not doing code reviews? So really it's just what are you actually going to do? Make sure you have a plan. And hopefully people aren't lying about it. What programming languages are being used? Pretty simple for us. It's generally PHP and JavaScript. Occasionally you'll do something else. You're like, oh, actually we have this little server written in Erlang for some reason. It does processing and things that are uploaded inside of an FTP folder. I don't know. So good to call that out now. Oh, why are you doing that? Do we have any expertise in that? Is this just a pet project that somebody decided to do it in? That happens. What frameworks are being utilized? Generally pretty easy for us. Drupal, jQuery, jQuery UI. This is where we'll list things like Angular, Vue.js, React, things like that. And we can say, hey, why are you using that? And we know when I say why are you using that, that's never a negative. Like you shouldn't be using that. That's genuinely why are you using that? What was the rationale? Which is most things have a really good reason. Third-party libraries. We're using Blazy for deferred image loading. Slice slider, that's supposed to be slick slider, for rotating the carousel component used on the home page. No frameworks outside of jQuery are planned, so no frameworks. So I'm not using Angular, Vue.js, React, anything else like that. Describe the automated build process. Again, this is to make sure you have an automated build process. Generally, we're not going to go into depth on like, well, how are you doing Jenkins and all that stuff. It's like, okay, you've got that figured out. We just want to make sure you're doing it. Again, we link out to the way that we do it. Any mapping and geolocation tools being utilized. We're displaying I don't know what that first thing is. Displaying a map of Tyson's facilities depending on address. I don't know what any of that is. I swear I overwrote this. I don't think it's saved. Okay, So just looking to make sure that if we're using any mapping software, things that we have licenses for it, and that they're going to work correctly. Is there any video that's being used? A lot of times we're looking here like for licenses again. Are you using Brightcove? Are you using YouTube? Are you using Vimeo? Are you hosting all the video yourself? Again, if you're hosting your video yourself, why are you doing that? There are other services that are good for that. And sometimes there is a legitimate reason. I just want to know why. That's what we're looking for here. Any form data being collected, you'll see this. I mean, this question I think has already been repeated like 5 times. Is there any PII information being collected? I mean, we're going to ask that 100 times, right?
All the different times somebody screwed it up.
Yeah. We don't want to do it, right? So any form data being collected and stored, we say, okay, well, prospective adopters' email address, phone numbers are being collected in a form. No data is being saved. We're passing it all through to Salesforce. And then how are exceptions being handled and is being logged. When your site breaks, we need to figure out why it broke. It's good to talk about that now and find a way to validate it. Again, with Aquia, it works pretty well. With Apache and PHP, has logging all turned on right there. For us, turn Watchdog off in production, or at least turn database logging off, not Watchdog in production. If I'm doing a Drupal one and I see that and they say, well, we can just go look at the reports and look at all the logs, I said, why are you doing that in production? Web content management systems. Which CMS are you using? We've asked this again. This just goes in a little bit depth. Using Drupal 8. Why are they using it? This is just so the why are they using it is kind of a 2-part thing. The big part is we want to understand kind of what our what our clients are doing and what we're selling. So why did we go with this one? The other thing is, did we make the right choice? Did we sell the Drupal Pet Store $1 million license for AEM, and why? Things like that, right? So for this, it's because the Drupal Pet Store has a strong commitment to open source software. What is the process for creating new pages and content, moving them between the environments? For us in Drupal, this is not always, but generally the same. We're going to do it in production using revisions, things like that. This is just to make sure that there is actually a process and it's been documented. Do you have anything to say on those, Bill? Ours is always the same, so.
No, I mean, a lot of the reason that's on there is like almost every CMS has like a best practice way of moving content up and down the system, right? And so many times people ignore those best practices and do really bad things. And that's basically what the question's on there, is like, do the right thing. I guess you said Drupal's so like AEM and cycles.
They're different processes.
Are they?
Yeah.
So like those, they say you would use production for everything and only production, and then everything pushes down to lower environments.
Well, that's what ours is too. I thought you guys pushed up from.
Only
can talk
for
about
stuff
it
like
later.
templates and stuff like that, which I think are roughly the same in
Yeah.
Configuration.
what's that? Yeah.
Are there any current or future plans to display content in a language other than the primary language? So just to make sure that we actually have that figured out, how are we doing language detection? Are we doing it based off of the URL? Are we doing it based off the browser? Are we doing it based off of location? Are we doing it based off of user selecting something? Things like that. The other thing that we always want to watch out for is, you're doing that in a right-to-left language. Does your creative actually support that? It's pretty important. Another big one here is a lot of creative now that I have seen in the past couple of years is very blocky and very element-driven instead of content that can flow. Things have to fit in small boxes. And you say, we're going to translate this to German. And I'm going to say, did you think about what that's going to do to your creative? Because you're probably going to overflow all your boxes. And then, of course, we want to think about translation. Who's actually doing the translation? A lot of times clients think, that's automated. It's not automated. I mean, we can automate some of it, but it's probably not going to look right. So we just want to find out right now, early on, how that's going to happen. And if we can't do it the way the client wants, tell them. Make sure that it's all taken care of. What out-of-the-box features are you planning to use that's including your architecture? So these are things like using Aqualift or Aquia Cloud Site Factory or Adobe Advanced Target. Is that what it is? Yeah. Different things that are, platform specific. So we're using Aqualift here for personalization. Then we have this whole section on testing that developers don't actually fill out. Testing people fill out. QA does. By the way, the person that does this form is generally the lead of a project or the architect of a project, but he'll do it with the input of everyone on his team, the QA, the tech ops, the other developers, and the business analyst. So he'll really be the one that's responsible for getting it all together, but everybody has input into it. It's not just a one-person thing. So testing, is this being scanned every day via SonarQube? SonarQube is a static analyzer that we've kind of standardized at VML. I don't know if this actually says it, but we don't actually scan PHP Drupal projects with SonarQube. We use PHP Mess Detector, PHP Code Sniffer, and then that new one that I don't remember. And it's automated. So generally I say that. Looks like this one maybe we did set up SonarQube. But just to make sure that you are running it through a static analyzer and making sure that everything that you're doing is up to snuff and we're not creating lots of messes. That one's preventing spaghetti code. Describe the process for application unit testing, just making sure that we're doing any, and if we're not, good reason why we don't. We generally do application testing. We don't do unit testing on a lot of our Drupal stuff because a lot of what we're writing is just glue code to make modules work, and a lot of it's very front-end driven. But it needs to be called out that it's there. Describe the process for sanity testing. They're all the same. Describe the process for integration testing. Describe the process for business process testing. Describe the process for performance load testing. A big thing that I always want to call out on performance load testing is if I see something like, oh yeah, we're doing automated performance load testing on our stage server every time we deploy. Did you tell your hosting environment? Because they're probably going to get mad. So make sure that we actually have a real process for that and that the hosting environment is okay with it. Same with security scans. Your hosting environment might get mad if you try to penetrate their website or their server. So most of them want to know 24 hours in advance. I don't know how everybody else's hosting environments work, but I know that's a thing that we run into.
I think it's everywhere. Like Azure, AMS, all of them. Those, like, if you don't tell them ahead of time, they'll straight up lock your IP down. Like, you're just done.
Yeah. Well, we'll get a call generally from Aqua. They'll be like, hey, what are you doing? You're hammering servers. Aqua in specific, by the way. If anybody here uses Aqua, almost all of their servers, all their plans, the production server, you get your own server if that's what you paid for. But your testing and your dev servers are shared. So if you hammer those, you'll kill other sites. So you have to tell them, and they have to provision a load balancer and spin up a new server for you. So you just got to let them know. Sites that don't belong to you, so, yeah.
But not the live sites that don't belong to you.
No, the live site is yours.
No, but
Oh, yeah, you're not going to interrupt anyone else's live sites. No, but you're going to interrupt their dev sites and stage sites. And
Let's
things
say
like
the
that,
shared
so.
load balancer in production.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah. There are some weirdnesses with Aqua. We could do a whole thing about the weirdnesses of Aqua if anyone wants to hear about those experiences.
Can't afford them to begin with.
Do what?
We can't afford them to begin with.
They're a good hosting provider. There's just some things you got to deal with, that's all. Describe the process for analytics testing. Describe the process for globalization testing. Describe the process for browser device testing. This one I think is really important. This, I hate. Latest version changes every day. Don't put that in there. Find a version and stick that version in there, and that is what we're testing to. So that's, when I see this, I call that out. Everybody always wants to say, oh, we're just going to do the latest version. No, we're not. The other thing is make sure that we are testing things on IE if it's important. Sometimes it's not important to test on IE. I know IE is not as bad as it used to be, but call that out here. And if we're not doing testing, there needs to be a good reason. And regression testing. Non-functional requirements. How are we actually gathering analytics? This is just making sure that we're gathering analytics. You can use GTM, Omniture, Adobe's, whatever. I like to point out if we're using the data layer or not here. Makes it really useful. Has a baseline for what is currently being captured been established. This is important for us because we want to know that what we did was a success. We measure our success, our KPIs, through increased traffic and sales, increased sales and increased conversions, things like that. So it's a good idea to make sure that we're already measuring things or we have access to it so we can look at it in the future and say, did we actually mess something up? Did we make it worse? Has configuration been done to ensure that internetized sites are tracked appropriately with the baseline? I guess this project says NA because it's not internationalized. I don't really even know what I would put here because normally our normal analytics takes care of it. Infrastructure, what will be the production environment? So we just want to know where is it at. Where's the non-production? Again, where's it at? Sometimes we'll have, hosting is being done by this custom-built AWS server, but the non-production is just our generic VML things. which I don't think have anymore, but we used to. What type of servers are being used? For us, it's always pretty easy. We're normally using Apache and PHP. This actually changes occasionally. Occasionally, we'll see IIS. Ryan Mottbeck had an IIS Drupal thing once. We just need to know, hey, why? If you realize everything I'm saying is why. Why are you doing that? That's not the default. Why is it IIS? If it's IIS, have you taken into account, I don't know, user permissions in IIS? The fact that it's really weird. We're making sure that there is a load balancer here. Sometimes I say, are you doing load balancing? Oh, no, didn't think about that. Okay, we should think about that. Describe the database being used. Who's responsible for design? Drupal, we really don't have to do much database design. The schema is handled for us by Drupal and creating entities. I think this is really for less CMS application, more custom applications. Performance and scalability. Are there any planned promotions or heavy traffic tied to the site launch? Yes, the client's hosting their annual benefactors luncheon the week of the launch to announce the new site. We expect media coverage during this time, so we'll need to prepare for a spike in traffic. So this is really important because we'll find the baseline that a site has 1 million site visitors a month. Okay, great, no problem. We've handled that. We've provisioned some hardware that's going to work for that. But the week that they go live, they're announcing it to their investors. So now, instead of having 1 million like we're expecting, they're going to have 10 million. We just need a plan on it. So it's a good thing to ask, hey, is there anything going to be told anyone so we can figure out how we're going to handle that? And then how will the increased load actually affect the performance? We need to know when we have to spike, what's our mitigation process. Aqua, we have burst instance, and it comes up pretty quick. We use Varnish for everything so that really the web server doesn't even get hammered. It's pretty great. SEO, how are 301 redirects? So you see there's a lot of stuff in here. It's not technology, it's just the entire project. Did you think about all the things? How are 301 redirects being handled to ensure SEO rankings not adversely affected? We're going to get a list of 301 redirects from the content administration team. We're going to implement those into the HT access file for the first launch so that we avoid having to hit the database. And, okay, so we're actually going to make them 302s in case we need to roll back because 301s are a bear to get out of caches. So does anybody else do that? I always put 302s like for the first week, and then after a week I go back and do 301s.
Because of that 1 or 2 times I've done a 301,
Yeah.
I've just been ruined. Yes.
Yeah, and then I spend like an entire weekend trying to fix everybody's busted.
Smart.
Yeah, so little tip.
There was Jeff Sykes at Cover has a good story. Somebody almost pushed a 301 that would have disabled a very major client's website for eternity.
Yeah, because it's so hard to get that out of everyone's caches. It's ridiculous. So then we changed the 302s to 301s after the site's been launched. And then we created a Jira ticket. Has the project been validated against the technical SEO checklist for website launches? Does everybody have one of these? I don't even know what's on here. We're not going to look. Well, yeah, so there's, this is for the SEO checklist, and you can create a module for it. Yeah.
There it is.
This is, so there's just a checklist to make sure that we have links. Do we have 404 pages? Do we have 403 pages? All those fun things. And we just want to say, did we actually go through that, or do we have a plan to go through it? We also have our own checklist just for Drupal. I keep dropping these things. We have our own checklist just for Drupal, so we make sure we go through those. And then the last thing here is launch day. Has the project been validated against the site pre-launch checklist? So again, this is something that everybody should have. What are you going to do on launch day to make sure that it's ready to go? Have you ran performance lighthouse scans? Have you made sure that there's a favicon? Have you informed the hosting provider that it's actually launching today? Did you make sure that your CDN is set up? Did you make sure Varnish is set up? All that fun stuff. So then we also have our own special Drupal 8 version. The Drupal 8 version, or the Drupal version of the launch checklist, is more specific things like, is there a front page? Did I turn off content listing for things that aren't supposed to be seen, right? So my pets are content types, but I don't want anybody to actually go to a pet page. I don't know why. So did I make sure to disable somebody seeing the full content, right? So that's what's in our Drupal 8 checklist. So we have a task to run a site crawl for dead links. Interesting. So we create a Jira ticket generally for that as well and say we have a task to go through and do this on the day of launch. Because this is, 6 months later from when we're doing the architecture review. And that is basically what we do. So this whole thing goes out like 2 weeks before the architecture review is actually scheduled, and whoever it is filling it out. And then we like to use the comments here to say, hey, keep a track of this. I saw you talked about this. We're trying to get everything fixed before we actually go to the architecture review. And the review is really just discussing everything. And then we keep these, and these are available for every single project we do. We can go back and look at it and figure out, in the postmortem, did we not talk about security and PCI? And then we go back and we're like, we did. Why did we not follow the plan? And it helps us to keep everything documented. So that's an architecture review, and I think it helps us quite a bit. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
I see you got run accessibility scan before launch. Is that something you have up in the testing section as well during development, or is that like you're not thinking about accessibility until it's almost too late?
It might need to go there.
I think it's duplicated both. I thought we had it.
Nope, we don't have accessibility up there, at least not at this time. Again, this might be an old one.
I could have sworn it's in the newest one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's a big focus for our
Yeah.
testing team, our QA department.
So we have a template for the new ones, but I couldn't click that button because if I did, it would have fired off emails.
Oh.
So I just copied an old one,
Okay, gotcha.
and it was easier that way. I didn't want to make people mad. But the new one probably does. I hope it does. I'll check, actually, because that's a good idea. ADA is a really important thing for everybody going forward. Do you have a question? Do you have a question?
Yeah, are you gonna get a copy of the one and maybe post it for us to?
Yeah, I might scrub out some of the VML stuff, but yeah,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Oh, I want to see all of you stuff.
I mean, you just did. There's nothing special on it. It's just.
I want the dog stuff and everything.
Yeah, I'm sure we can share this.
Yeah.
Let me validate with somebody that I can, but I think I can.
You're all right. But we've
Bill's
actually checked before.
Okay.
I can't remember why.
Okay.
I mean, it's on YouTube, so.
Yeah.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned how you don't like saying the latest version.
Yes.
But if this is written 6 months before a site goes live, why are you testing on a browser that no one uses anymore?
That's a good question, but we can go update it in the future. Call that out.
This is the type of stuff I think we derail because I agree with Michael. Like I usually put whatever the latest version at launch, the latest 2 versions at launch are what we test against. Because like a lot of times we're using an automated testing framework, and that's like what you. But I
wouldn't say that though, because
I know you're mad. Like I get it.
It's a hard one. So a lot of these architecture reviews like devolve down into we didn't get past the first section because we spent the entire hour screaming at each other about things like that, which is unfortunate. But that's why we have the comments section. So hopefully everything's already been written beforehand. There's a lot of conversations that go on in these because I mean that's a good point. Yeah, I wouldn't say the latest at the time of launch because I did 6 months worth of work and it works.
Yeah.
And then iOS launched a new version of Safari the week before launch. I'm not going to go back and fix all that or check it and everything, right? I mean, maybe I will. I don't know. It depends on what they're doing. But I'm not going to be beholden to that. Yeah. That's really a scope problem more than this problem. I don't want that word in the scope. Latest.
I can see that too.
Minimal browser requirement, like minimum version of.
Yeah.
That could be a good way.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. That's true. If you just say like Chrome LTS, Firefox LTS, and Edge LTS, whatever they're current.
Yeah, LTS would be good. Anything else?
That was a lot. You did good.
Thank you, guys.
That's really great.
Hope everybody starts doing these.